Welcome to the Success Ascent. My name is Pat Mancuso, the creator and host of our show. Today we welcome Pete Mohr. Pete is out of Ontario, Canada. He is an entrepreneur, owns multiple businesses, including Shootopia. He also runs a podcast called Simplifying Entrepreneurship. In our episode today, Pete shared a number of golden nuggets. He says, first, you own your business. It shouldn't own you. He talks about the 4 Ps: product, process, people, and profit. He says these all have to be aligned through processes in your business. He also talks about your organizational chart is your accountability chart. And lastly, he shares the wheel of momentum. Ladies and gentlemen, I know you're going to enjoy the episode today, so on to the ascent. He's owned franchises, started his own businesses, and bought and sold some along the way as well. His passion is helping other businesses and business leaders and owners cut through the frustration and chaos of running their businesses by providing systems and framework that simplify their life as a leader. Now, I want to hear about how that looks, Pete. Simplifying their life as a leader. The systems that reduce frustration and create freedom. He's also the creator of Simplifying Entrepreneurship podcast, as well as he's got some amazing resources at his website for entrepreneurs. So, Pete, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks so much for having me, Pat. It's just an absolute pleasure.
Well, we're excited. I know you're going to share some great content with our listeners today. So, Pete, I always have a little fun with my guests before we get started, jump into the content. And I say, that was Pete on paper. Tell us something that wasn't on paper about Pete.
Well, one of the things is that for those of you who are watching, I've got a couple of instruments in behind me, and I actually have been in bluegrass bands and recorded 4 bluegrass albums. And those were predominantly through the 90s and early 2000s, but picking and grinning with my buddies was a great passion, still is. I just don't, I'm just not up on stage as much these days because of COVID. There's not a lot of stuff happening here in Canada for live entertainment, but love it, enjoy playing music, and enjoy picking and grinning with my buddies.
I love that. I love that. And it's probably a little bit easier time if you wanted to do that, with the online world and how you can, put material and content out there. So yeah. I'm going to challenge you. I think you got to hit your number one hit inside of you. You just got to pull it out. I love it. So Pete, let's talk first about, we're going to get into all the great things you do and how you're impacting entrepreneurs. However, I want to ask you about your journey as an entrepreneur. So, the Success Ascent is about the journey, and we know that journey is not always, completely upward. Sometimes it's backwards or sideways. So what have you learned? Like, what are some of the biggest things you've learned as an entrepreneur going through your journey personally as an entrepreneur?
Well, we only have a limited amount of time. I've been an entrepreneur almost all my life, Pat. I started back in 94, got out of university in 93, worked for my dad's best friend for, about 6 months. His name was Peter, too. Great guy, great business, really enjoyed it. But at the same time, I realized, working for somebody else just wasn't for me. I had to kind of get out, do my own thing. And bought a franchise, refinishing franchise, and we refinished bathtubs and liners and all sorts of different things, kitchens and cabinets and all that, and did that for about 15 years. I also had another business where we had a cleaning franchise at the same time and worked through those, became a business broker. I know you used to be a realtor, so I was a licensed realtor and business broker as well, and help people buy and sell businesses. And that's where I found one of the businesses that I still own. I own a company called Shootopia here in Canada, and we have a couple of shoe stores. And I bought another shoe store, opened another shoe store.
Oh, wow.
Had a learning with one shoe store that is no longer around. And I call those learnings. You were asking for what are my learnings? A big learning on one of them. But that's the beauty of entrepreneurship. There's ups and downs. There's all these things to talk about. But at the end of it, you become wiser along the things and one of the things I like about simplifying entrepreneurship too, Pat, is that I can share those learnings with other people through these conversations, through my coaching, all this other stuff. It's like, hey, listen, I've been there. I've done that. I'm going to advise you at least to think about this stuff because, as we get older, Pat, and as we go through these experiences, there's a lot of different stuff. And it's like, I need to share this with some people so that they don't go through the same thing. Right.
Well, sure. Right. Because everybody wants to reinvent the wheel and there's not a lot of new wheels. I mean, there's new
No.
products, but there's not a lot of new systems, if you may,
Yeah.
around that. So let me ask you a couple of questions around your journey as an entrepreneur. So what ceiling did you hit along the way that you just struggled to break through? And what was the thing that finally like forced you or allowed you to break through? Like, what was that ceiling that your head hurt? And then all of a sudden, whoa, I broke through. What was that in that journey?
There's been a lot over the time. Like when I was running a service-based business, I was going from having my own business. I'm out there doing the work myself. Hiring that first person, putting that second truck on the road was a big one, right?
Yeah.
Getting through those sort of things, and then adding a second business into the fray where I was running two businesses at one time, and moving through. Can I do this? Can I work through that? Getting through that sort of stuff, building those businesses up. Like the cleaning business went from 30 clients to 300 clients, right?
Wow.
And then we sold it, and so from that, like that's a hurdle. Should I sell this? Should I not sell this? What am I going to do afterwards? All of these different things. Building the shoe stores from one store to two store to three stores, back to two stores, closing a shoe store. That's a hurdle. Like,
Yeah.
like there's big things to think about. There's people at stake.
Yeah.
There's money at stake. There's, all sorts of different things. So I think just being an entrepreneur, there's hurdles every day, and it's different magnitudes, and there's different levels that you go through on each and every decision. And that's what we do as entrepreneurs. We make decisions.
So when did you first get the entrepreneurial itch? Is there one moment in time, one individual, one event? Like, can you put your finger on it?
It kind of sounds, old schoolish, I guess, in a way, but my mom and dad, my dad ran a business for someone else, but he was basically the operating partner. And my mom, she was a teacher, and she left teaching when my sister and I were young, and she was making crafts and doing stuff. And so I started making crafts with her at an early age. I was like making these little teasel hedgehog bark things and selling them to craft stores when I'm like 10 years old with my mom. She's selling pine cone wreaths and all this other stuff. And she's like, and here's my son trucking in with his little things that he's making, So she was, got me going on that sort of stuff. And then of course I did the stuff that you hear every other kid doing. I cut the lawns and I shoveled the laneways. I did all that sort of stuff as a young person. I always wanted to make my own money so I could spend my own money and do my own thing. I wanted the freedom. Yeah.
What's interesting, Pete, is almost every entrepreneur that we've interviewed over the last 2 years, they say the same thing. It's a family member, or maybe it's a relative or a neighbor or somebody that spurred that. And I just love that. And it goes to show that today, as entrepreneurs, one of our responsibilities is to do the same thing for the younger generation, because that's where the future entrepreneurs are going to come from. And
absolutely,
boy, do we need that. So
and that's the great thing with these podcasts, Pat, is that they can be listening to all these things and understand. It's like, hey, that's what I want to do.
Yeah.
And if we can inspire that sort of stuff, then we've done our jobs, right?
Absolutely. So one last question on the entrepreneur journey. What surprised you the most? Like, there been something along the way that you were just like, whoa, I wasn't expecting that?
I don't really can't remember any big surprises that way from, I wasn't expecting that. I mean, I think, we're going to talk a little bit later about the different frustrations along the way, I think.
Right.
But, generally comes back to often to people.
Yeah.
And either the good surprises or the bad surprises tend to come down to often people.
Yeah. I love that. So let's talk about, you and what you're doing now, the simplifying entrepreneurship. And I want to ask you some questions. And I want to start with, really kind of a big one that's going to form the whole conversation around this. So you've got this concept of the 4 Ps in business. So let's start there and talk about the 4 Ps.
Yeah. Well, to, take it down really in a nutshell, the 4 Ps are aligning the right product or service, aligning your processes around that, having the right people so that you can drive the right profit. And when that all works, when you align those first 3 things, making sure that your product truly is something that people want and that it's addressing the problem. So what's the problem the person has? What are your solutions that are going to address it? And what does their life look like afterwards? And then aligning all the processes in your business. And you got to think, I mean, there's a lot of processes in your business. And
Right.
we very seldom anyway, ever have perfect processes. But that doesn't mean we don't need to keep perfecting them.
Sure.
They can't just be collecting dust. They always have to be looked at, revisited, reworked, so that you're really maximizing all the processes within everything in your business
Mhm.
and aligning accountabilities to them,
Mm.
which is the big piece that
Yeah.
often is overlooked.
So talk to me about that. So, I mean, I hear the word accountability and I might have a different definition than you, and listeners might have a different definition. So talk a little bit about that.
So we were chatting a little bit. I love books, as anybody who's watching can see. One of the frameworks that I really like is out of the book Traction by Gino Wickman, and he calls your organizational chart an accountability chart. And I really like that sort of framework in the fact that every process needs to have an accountability and needs to have someone who is in charge, not two people in charge, one person. Because when there's two people in charge of the same thing, it creates confusion,
Right.
and confusion kills.
Mhm.
So one person needs to be in charge of any process so that if anything is falling, and we talked about fixing them, they understand it. They know what needs to be done. They know what needs to be moved ahead. They're accountable for it because it's a piece of the puzzle that the leader is
Right.
communicating why this is a process and why it needs to happen. So then you're working through those different things. And when everybody has accountabilities, and by the way, everybody wants accountabilities.
Really? Are you sure?
Yeah, I'm sure. Because if they don't want accountabilities, they really don't want to be on your team.
Yeah. Yeah. That's exactly right. Yeah.
So, I mean, a lot of business owners think that they can't allow accountabilities to happen underneath them. They're like, oh, I just I have to be involved in that and all this other stuff. And in fact, most growth, most experienced growth, and most scale, as the word is these days, but from that perspective, only happens when accountabilities transferred to someone else. And often it's being done even better than the entrepreneur themselves was doing it in the past, because that person is more focused, more,
Mhm.
in it and living it than just sort of the passing bys of the owner and or entrepreneur around that. So it's accountability is a really interesting thing, but
Yeah.
something that's often overlooked to the depth that it needs to be looked at by the leadership.
So what do you think? I mean, I have some perspective. However, you're here today to tell us perspective. What do you think is the biggest challenge for an entrepreneur and owner of letting go of that accountability? Why don't they understand this?
Because they don't know the reason why.
Okay, so let's go there. What is
Yeah.
that?
They don't truly understand. Well, one, nobody's ever given them permission to release accountability.
That's interesting. Okay.
So one of my big jobs as a coach,
Right.
working with I don't work with managers, I work with owners. And so one of my big jobs is really giving them permission to hand off some of those things, and so that they can truly work in the areas that they love and that best represents their abilities within their business.
Yeah. Yeah. And they lose sight of that as the companies grow, right? I mean, that
Always.
as the companies get bigger and they scale, they have to let go of some of that, and yet they lose sight of it.
Right. And they're dealing with stuff. I'll put it back in the frameworks of my shoe stores. So we're having a chat today in the middle of the day. I'm at my home office. I'm not at my shoe stores.
Right.
Well, why is that? Because we have accountabilities in place, and we have, like, I spend 8 or 10 hours a week working on the shoe side of things in that business, mainly in meetings, basically, in order to make those things happen, and making sure that my dashboards and my conversations are all around the accountabilities and the KPIs, those key metrics
Mhm.
around what we need to do in order to deliver our promise to our customer. So if somebody comes in my door and has a return of a shoe, let's say they, it was the wrong size or something. Well, I'm not the best person to talk to there. In fact, the person who, is our salespeople are the best people. They're going to be able to address their issues. They're going to be able to get them through in a quickest manner. They're going to be able to deal with them in every way. Why would I want to be involved in that when so my philosophy around accountabilities is always have the accountabilities dealt with at the lowest possible level of your organization, not at the highest possible level.
Interesting. Okay.
Everything should be as low in the organizational or accountability chart, depending on how you look at it, as low as it can possibly go. And that's why you need good processes, because without the processes, those decisions can't be made. Remember, we were talking about decision making is what we do as leaders. There's only so much decision power in a day. So you need to focus your time and decision making abilities on the very most important and crucial decisions within your business, and let everybody deal with the most important and crucial ones in their position as well.
So I've got a question for you. We talked earlier and of the 3 Ps, because there's 4, but the 3 are really important.
Yeah.
We talked about the one that your perception of owners struggle with is people.
Yeah.
And yet we just got done talking about the owner releasing accountabilities to the people. It kind of seems like it's almost like a two-way street there, right? Like the cause of the problem is the cause of the challenge. Do you see, you see where I'm going with that?
Yeah, a little bit, but that's why we talked about process.
Yeah.
And, if your process is right, if you've honed the process, then the accountabilities are really simple. They're really straightforward. It's a yes or a no on every decision, because it's already laid out and simple for them to make that decision, because everything around uniqueness involves a decision. So what you're trying to do is take away most of the uniqueness at the lower levels of making those decisions, so that the decisions are simple.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
And when the decisions are simple, you don't need to be involved. And in fact, you shouldn't be involved.
Yeah.
Save your decision-making power for the big ones.
I love that. So let me ask you a question before we jump to another piece. So we got COVID, right?
Yeah.
You got COVID, we got COVID, the whole world's got COVID.
Yeah.
What have you seen, like in business, with your process and businesses making adjustment, or just businesses in general? Like, what have you seen with how businesses have responded?
Well, I'll flip it back to my business again. We can talk about some of my clients too, if you want to, but generically, of course.
Right.
But from a Shootopia perspective, in Canada, in Ontario, where I live, in 2021, we were closed to the public January, February. We were open in March. We were closed April and May. We were closed 4 out of 12 months in 2021 to, walk-in traffic. Sure, our web store was open and curbside pickup was open and some of that sort of stuff, but essentially we were closed 4 months. During those 4 months, we made incredible leaps and bounds and gains in our web store development and some of the stuff that's been going on there. And that's going to live for a long, long time, Pat.
Right.
We're experiencing growth, continued growth, because of the things that we did while we were closed. We didn't just watch Netflix and, sit around. We actually worked on our systems. We did some of the things that we needed to do, that we had wanted to do. We used our time effectively. Our customers continued to support us as much as they could online and curbside and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And we came out. So the next 8 months, 7 of 8 were our best ever months we've ever had in our history.
Yeah.
And we can hardly even get stock.
Yeah.
If we
now
had the ability to get what we wanted, it would have been even that much better.
Yeah. It's funny that you say that. I wonder the long-term effects of businesses that can't get product to sell, like car dealerships here. I mean, I drive by a car dealership every night, and there's only and this is a big Chevrolet dealer. They only have like 12 cars in the lot, and none of them are brand new. Like,
I know.
I wonder how much that's costing our economy.
A lot.
It's just crazy.
It's a lot.
You're not ever going to get that back, right? It's not. You're never going to. You're never going to make up the car sales or make up the shoe sales or make up any.
We're feeling it. We're feeling it. Even though we are experiencing some of our best ever months, which is great, it could be that much better, and that hurts. It's like, oh my God, I'm turning away so much business, right?
Yeah. Let me send my boat over and I'll pull, get my shoes myself.
But you know what? This is something that is uncontrollable.
Yeah.
And my feeling around that sort of stuff is you need to control the controllables and you need to let the uncontrollables go.
Yeah.
So when we were closed, it was uncontrollable. It was government mandated. We couldn't do anything. So it's like, okay, well, what can we control? What can we do to push this ahead? Right. And that's really a philosophy that I have and work with a lot of the clients that I work with, the entrepreneurs that I work with. It's like, okay, that's uncontrollable. Let's move on and get on to something that's controllable and work through it,
I love it. So let's shift gears a little bit. Talk to me about this wheel of momentum concept. We'll spend a little bit of time talking about that. So what's the wheel of momentum?
So the wheel of momentum is it's really a model, and it's a circular model. Okay. It's on my website if you go to simplifyingentrepreneurship.com. But basically it's this concept, and I do some writing on it and what have you, but I believe that everything starts with clarity. So when you have full clarity as a leader and you communicate it, by the way, which is, I guess, a seventh C out of this model, but communication of all of these things is so important. So it starts with clarity. But when you have clarity and you communicate it properly, it builds confidence. And when you have confidence and your team has confidence, because now they know what's happening, right? We talked about the right people and all that sort of stuff. Your clients need to know what's going on. Your outsourced suppliers, everybody around you, as the P of the people there, needs to know what's happening. So they have clarity. They're building the confidence. They're like, hey, this is going somewhere. This is happening. Right. So when that happens, you start to build competence around the business and the idea. And then as the competence builds, you're feeling good again. And you're out there looking and saying, hey, what else can we do to make this thing happen? And it usually involves collaboration or cooperation. And from that perspective, it's like, hey, I can bring in an outsourced partner. I can partner up with this group. I can, add more team members or whatever the case is in order to make this dream come true. Right. After that, we're building capacity, right? As we're building that, the capacity is growing. And when we have the capacity for this, you're starting to see other things. They open up and it's like, wow. Yeah. Now, as the leader, you're starting to get, all of those other things were kind of around getting it done. Now you're getting back into the creative space again because you're seeing the future again and you're seeing what could be. So once you get in that creativity sort of idea and mindset, you're going back to clarity again, because now you have to clarify that idea and get the confidence, competence, cooperation, capacity, and creativity. And that's why I've kind of laid this out as a wheel, and it just keeps chugging and chugging along. Yeah. And so when you think about those things, if you're ever stopped on confidence, and you're feeling that your team or yourself, you're just not confident, you got to go back for more clarity. Yeah. If you're stopped on capacity, you got to look for more cooperation, or maybe go back to competence, Yeah. So really you can't move ahead until those things are made. It's like it stops, right?
What do you mean you can't jump ahead 3 spokes and yeah.
It's tough, things, but when we talk about a lot of that stuff and growth and ideas and, if you're like me, most entrepreneurs are, it's like ideas come all the time, right?
Yeah, shiny bling.
Oh my gosh, yeah. We need these thinking tools in order to press through them and to see whether they're even worthwhile.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So Pete, we're going to shift gears. I prepared you for this. So what's the best advice that you've ever been given that hopefully you followed, and what did you learn?
Well, getting back to there's a few, but one I'll use. It's an acronym, and it's I learned it by one of my coaches, Joel Weldon, his great speaking coach. But I don't know whether it was his, but he certainly introduced it to me, and it's the word system. So the acronym for the word system is it saves you stress, time, energy, and money. A system saves you stress, time, energy, and money. And when I look at the word process, which I use in my 4P models, it's the same sort of thing, right? So if you look at that from a leadership perspective and you're really honing your systems and processes, and it's going to save you stress, time, energy, and money, does that not release frustration and create freedoms? I think it does.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. What great advice. And I have never heard that before. So I am so glad that you shared that. I just love that. You need to take process and put some words to it. That means the same thing. There you go.
Next step, I guess.
Next step. Yeah. Okay. So let's flip it upside down. You've been prepared for this. What's the worst advice that you've ever been given that hopefully you didn't follow? And if you did, what did you learn?
Well, I think there's I can't think of anything specifically, but I'll put it back to marketing probably.
Okay.
And when I look at some of the marketing things that I've done over the years for any of my, I'm not going to, pinpoint anything in particular, but I've been sold goods on marketing in the past and really thought that these things would work in my benefit, only to look back and say, "What the heck? I just spent how many thousands of dollars and I haven't
Yeah.
got one new client or one new sale or any of these sort of things." So, I think over my years of, let's call them learnings,
Right.
around some of that, I do more educated buys on my marketing, and I'm really looking for specifics, and I'm looking for things that are truly going to equate to the next best thing of getting a new client or selling another product, or it's got to directly relate to something
Right.
that's going to make a difference for me, because I've spent probably a house worth of money on stuff that may not have particularly given me what I was looking for. I don't do that anymore.
You mean you bought things that you thought were great, and then you did maybe a module or two, and then you didn't do it? You do that? Oh my
Yeah,
God, I love it.
yeah,
I love it.
yeah,
I think every entrepreneur does, right?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Pete, you have been amazing, and I'm going to do a little PSA here, and then we're going to come back to you for a final thought. So, ladies and gentlemen, we so appreciate your support. We'd love to have you subscribe. You can go to www.thesuccessascent.com. You can also find us at all of your podcast sources. We'd love reviews, subscriptions, shares, whatever you want to do. We just love what we do, and we're in our second year, and we get some amazing talent like Pete and our other guests. And so whatever you can do to share the message, we absolutely appreciate it. We appreciate if you're listening or watching today. So Pete, what's a final message, a final thought you'd give to everybody here? And I'm going to scroll that website on the bottom while you're doing that, where they can find out information on you, find out the wheel, and get some other great things there as well. What would be your final thought?
Well, I'm gonna use one more line that I like to use, which is this. For those of you who are business owners, you own your business. It shouldn't own you.
Yeah.
And when you start looking at things, how much time are you spending? Are you working 50, 60, 70 hours a week and not looking back? Are you not spending the time with your to hit your kids' baseball game? Did you make it to dinner last night? Like, all of these different things that we tend to miss as entrepreneurs go by quickly. 10
Yeah.
years happens quickly. You look back and you're like, what the heck just happened?
Yeah,
Right?
absolutely.
And so it's time to start looking at why you got into business, streamlining your business through these 4 Ps so that you can truly enjoy the life that you want to live from your business, and have it set up and derive those pleasures that it can deliver to you
Yeah.
when it's run properly.
I love that. That's great. That's absolutely great advice. And I think every entrepreneur I've talked to, it's one of the things where they wish they would have discovered that balance or counterbalance, if you may, sooner, because that time doesn't come back. There's no doubt about it. So,
yeah.
well,
I call it creating a turnkey business, Pat, and that's just such an important piece.
Yeah, and that's why business owners, entrepreneurs need coaches and mentors, because that's a blind spot for many of them. We think, and we've all done it, right? We all think we got to do it and work, work hard, and you've got the one thing in the background. It's not about working hard. I know that. So
I have coach. I mentioned one, Joel Weldon. I mean, I've had several coaches along the way, and I continue to be coach. It's such an important piece. And you were asking how people can get a hold of me as well. Best way to do it is just Google Simplifying Entrepreneurship, and simplifyingentrpreneurship.com is my website. We had talked a little bit about my business assessment. So the business assessment, which is very simple to get, and I see it scrolling across the bottom here of the video, but simplifyingentrpreneurship.com, you just go to the top right-hand corner, click the business assessment, and it's a really great business assessment. It's through Business Made Simple, because I'm a Business Made Simple certified coach. And from that perspective, it takes about 12, 15 minutes to fill out maybe 50 questions, mostly multiple choice, but it spits you back a 50 to 60 page PDF that really outlines all of the things that you're doing super well as a business owner and leader, and
Yeah.
the things that you need to work on. And from that perspective, if you go no farther than that, it gives you back this great document that you can read next Sunday and kind of get your thoughts around how you can make this year even better.
I love it. I love it. Well, thank you so much for offering that. Pete, you've been amazing today. I love what you're doing. I appreciate your time. I just want to thank you so much for everything you shared today.
Thank you, Pat. It's been a pleasure.
Oh, thanks so much. Ladies and gentlemen, as I end every show, be happy, be healthy, be safe until we talk again. Take care. Thank you for joining us on The Ascent today. You can find us at any of your favorite podcast sources. You can also subscribe to get updates and additional pieces of value that we send out at www.thesuccessascent.com. Thanks so much for your support. Please leave us a review. Have an amazing day. Take care.